Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Now Radio, brought to you by Revolution Radio, listener-supported radio, where information never sleeps. Before we get started with today's show, and I've got Fritz Springmeier on the line with me, by the way, I want to remind everybody that this is, in fact, listener-supported radio, Revolution Radio, as well as Talk Now Radio. And, well, basically, the only way we can continue to do our shows is through the donations and the well, like in my case, I got Google ads up on my site and links to the books of the authors and things of that there nature. So if you think the show's worth having and you want to make sure it stays on the air and stays sponsor-free so that we don't have sponsors telling us what we can and can't talk about, I suggest that you help us out with the donations. And, if our authors or one of our guests are talking about a book or a DVD or something that you like, don't be bashful to get it for yourself, and always follow the links from the host webpage with the affiliate link on it so that they get credit for it, in other words. Otherwise, you're getting it straight from Amazon or Barnes & Noble. The hosts don't get anything, so you're not supporting them, in other words. And I'd also like to remind everybody before we get started, the call-in number is 347-688-2902. And if y'all want to learn more about Fritz Springmeier, and if I'm wrong about this URL, I'll have him correct me, but it says here it's fritzspringmeier.dbs2000ad.com. I believe it's his website, or it's a site that somebody's got up for him. He's got a lot of material out there, stuff that we may or may not cover in the show, so you can always get more information by going there, and you can pick up his book on Amazon. So, Fritz, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for inviting me on the show, and hello to all your listeners. That was a strange URL you gave. My website is pentracks.com.
Oh.
pentracks.com. And then I post articles on Facebook almost every day that are pretty powerful. They're articles that expose, that give hope, but you have to be careful because there's another Facebook page that goes under my name that was created by somebody else. But if you get to the one with me wearing a cowboy hat, that's not my Facebook page.
Oh.
I mean, that's my picture, but it's not my page.
I'm trying to... Okay, I think about... You said it was pentracks.com? pentracks. Oh, A-C-K.
Pen like you write with a pen, and then tracks like a bunny rabbit leaves in the snow. pentracks.com is my website.
Got it.
Books are available, but that other address you gave, I'm not familiar with that.
Well, I'm at pentracks.com, and it's got a picture of you with a cowboy hat on it here too.
Oh, the one. That is mine. I'm saying the Facebook page with the cowboy hat's not mine.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right. Well then, folks, I posted the correct URL in the chat room. It is pentracks.com. And it ends with /.blog, but you don't really have to put that on there. I didn't do it, and it still took me there anyway. It's kind of like a redirection to the blog page automatically when you click onto it.
Right.
Pardon me?
Right.
Oh.
The listeners, if they go to my blog, my website, they won't see me post much stuff on there. I haven't posted anything for a long time because what I did was I had to shift to Facebook. It's when I put my website up to begin with, they were spamming me. I was getting like a spam like every 2-3 seconds, and I would spend like 3 hours a day deleting spam. They were just hitting me so hard. I just found out the hard way that I couldn't use my blog. So what we did is we put filters on, but when you put filters on, it means that the vetting process for people is so tedious, you really can't communicate with people. So Facebook, surprisingly, even though it's watched by them, it works best.
Okay, and that's www.facebook.com/Fritz.Springmeier.9. I'm at your Facebook page right now, and I'm putting that one in the chat room. Want to make sure people know where to reach you. They want more, especially since you're saying that you, keep that your current information up on Facebook. That would probably be the best place to get a hold of you. And plus, they can leave you messages there.
Right.
So, at any rate, also, I've been trying to promote your book, Bloodlines of Illuminati, but I think I recently found out, don't you have a revised version out there?
Well, the last version that came out before they hauled me off to prison around 2001, and we shifted from Ambassador House publishing it to Pentracks.com, which was my publishing company. So it shifted publishers, but it's still the same. It's still the same text, the same version as what Ambassador House was publishing. So no, there isn't anything.
All right, I just wanted to make sure because I thought I saw something on Facebook, but I could have misunderstood it. Now, about this here, before we get started on the actual Bloodlines of Illuminati, would you like to share with us a little something about the arrest you're referring to? Was that in any way related to your work you were doing with the on the Illuminati?
Yeah, if a person knows the details of it, it's very obvious that it had nothing to do with criminal activity on my part. They said that I knew about a bank robbery, and in order to get the jury to go along with that accusation, they had three witnesses. The one witness they forgave about 120 years of prison time for. Another person they released from prison who had 3 more years to do. And then the third person they gave immunity from all of his crimes. And so they had to do some heavy duty bribing to get these guys to testify. And then if you listen to what they said, they never said anything that amounted to, none of their testimony should have been allowed in. It's all just hearsay. And it didn't even amount to anything. Like the one guy said that he had heard through the grapevine that more than one person had done this bank robbery, which, as a thinking person, you go, well, that doesn't mean anything.
Right. I mean, this could have been the Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. Why does it have to be Fritz?
And then the other guy, he testified that sometime during the year of the bank robbery, he had seen the bank robber in my car. And you go, so that's the kind of nonsense that was used. And then when they wrote it up in the federal law books, my case, the notes there say that I set a new low standard for someone being that you can send someone to prison based on no evidence. So I set a new low standard for evidence required to send somebody to prison. So I did 8 years on that, which is way more than a lot of. Some people do murder and get less time than that. But it wasn't about me being a criminal. It was about getting me off of the streets and shutting me up. But the funny thing about it is that while I'm languishing in some prison cell, my stuff on the internet takes off because that's when the internet got really going, and it just spread like wildfire all over the world. So, they weren't stopping my work from going forward. It went forward better than when I'd been out there.
Yeah, I think pretty much once something hits the internet, it's picked up by so many people, they couldn't silence it if they wanted to. They'd have to arrest half the nation.
Yeah, yeah, that my materials now belongs to the world. The genie can't be stuffed back into the bottle. We'll make an analogy. So,
but I guess they thought they could at the time.
Yeah.
I've heard of this here. I've heard of this happening before. There was a Joanne Richards that was on my show who says her husband was put in jail to silence him, and supposedly he's been in there for at least 15 years. Yeah,
they can be kind of brutal that way. And they didn't treat me like a common criminal either. They sent me to prison supposedly because I knew about a bank robbery, but they didn't treat me that way. I mean, if I'd been treated like a criminal, I'd have been treated a lot better. They, for instance, came in the middle of the night and grabbed me and moved me secretly from one prison to another, So, and of course, people that were in contact with me were desperate to find out what they'd done with me, So they they found out that people weren't going to allow them just to do that kind of stuff.
Right.
They got upset that people were hounding them to find out where I was. It was their own fault. They didn't have to treat me that way.
That is true. But I tell you, for the listeners out there, if y'all think that this kind of thing doesn't happen, you better think about Gary McKinnon. Gary McKinnon's case was public, and just behind hacking into a computer, granted a government computer, but still, he didn't do no major damage or anything. It didn't really turn over any secrets like Snowden did to other countries, but yet they wanted to arrest him for 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they will do it if you given the right reasons. I'm pretty sure in Gary's case, they probably didn't want him blabbing about what he found in there about UFOs.
Mm.
I mean, if he could have proved that there was a military cover-up, that would have given them a black eye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the government, as far as that subject, is on all sides of that issue. They got their hand in the pie everywhere. So, yeah, that's another topic.
Well, I understand also from what you were telling me while we were waiting for the show to start that there's also been some recent changes in the Illuminati, that it's no longer the 13 illuminated bloodlines that I used to see on Google so much, but now it's 7 of them. They've downsized.
Yeah, when the first thing that happened as far as my research with the Illuminati is I on my own, and I've never been involved in the occult world, by the way. I'm a Christian. I did all of these thousands of hours of research, but I was an outsider looking in, And then I had the divine fortune of getting to know 4 women that had been teamed together in the Illuminati that were trying to get out. They were a support team for each other to escape. And they pointed me in the right directions. They couldn't just start blabbing about things because they had mind control that if they told secrets, they would suicide. But they could say some a little here and there, enough to, if I'm pointed in the right direction, like a bloodhound, I can get on the trail and follow the trail myself. And I knew before I met them that there were 13 top families. But then there was a meeting in Gstaad, Switzerland, which is a watering hole for the elite, in 2009, and David Rockefeller, Baron Jacob Rothschild, and William Van Dyne, these 3 leaders passed the baton to the next generation. And then the next generation, there being kind of a generational gap there, have now approached things from a different perspective. Where the older generation, wanted people like me eliminated or shut up, the newer generation realizes with the internet, you're not going to hide in the shadows, So they're less intimidated by people like me. So I have less pressure on me. Plus, they decided that there's a lot of riffraff, within there was a lot of excuse me, the scummy people that that the Illuminati had grown pretty fat and sassy, and so they made themselves meaner and leaner, so to speak, and they cut back from 13 to 7 top families, and they eliminated 300 of these fraternal organizations and clubs that were in the Illuminati. So like the Order of the Skull and Bones and Scroll and Key, those were Illuminati initiation fraternal organizations. They cut them loose. And so the Bundy family was one of the families that they trimmed out in their, as they got themselves more efficient, the Bundy family. And then, this recent thing here with Clive and Bundy in Nevada, from one of my sources, it sounds to me like that they are related to the Illuminati Bundy family. But of course, like I say, the Bundy family has lost their status as being an Illuminati family. That's why George Bush, he was invited to go to Switzerland in 2009, and he canceled at the last minute because he realized that since he's no longer, a member within the Illuminati and they're not going to back him up, that he's vulnerable to being arrested for the torture, the crimes he did. He was the one that ordered the torture of people, civilian Afghanis and so forth. So he's legally responsible, and there were plans to arrest him if he got to Europe. So he had to cancel his trip. So I think that's part of why Bundy there in Clive and Bundy in Nevada is now free game for the government, is that bloodlines lost their status. But from what I understand, this is just the first step. They're going to there's 61 other ranches in the state of Nevada, and the system plans to confiscate about 2,000 head of cattle from these other ranches. So this was just the first step in a process of the way they're going to do things.
So what I find unusual that I'm hearing here, though, is that nobody tried to arrest Bush here in Texas or in America, but they're trying to do it over there when he had nothing to do with Europe. Well, he can be prosecuted for crimes because torturing people is a war crime, and the world court and the whole 9 yards. Over here, he's got too much infrastructure to protect him. He's got his Secret Service and everybody else, but over there he doesn't have the level of protection. The world system is not monolithic. I mean, you've got they created these intelligence agencies, which aren't very intelligent at times, like the NSA, the CIA, and these things. It's sort of like somebody starting out with like a 10-room house, and every year they add another 5 rooms, so that this thing becomes a monstrosity. And who knows who all is connected to there's boxes within boxes within boxes. Even the Illuminati, which had
controls originally on the NSA, they don't have total control over the NSA, and they're trying to rein the NSA in. That's why that you've seen in the news, Obama's going after the NSA, watching or listening to everything that we do. Why there's some self-serving motive of the Illuminati to promote that, because the NSA listens to them too, and so these intelligence agencies are like have bifurcated to the point that no one really totally controls the whole thing, and so I used to hear people say, well, there's rogue elements of the CIA that are against the New World Order or against the trauma-based mind control that they did. And I used to be kind of skeptical, but the longer I go, the more I think, well, there may be some truth to that, because these organizations are just, who knows what they consist of, because everything's on a need-to-know basis. So one person can start a whole downline without anybody knowing about it, and then someone within that downline can create their own downline. So yeah, it's kind of a problem for all of us, including the Illuminati.
I actually read somewhere though that Obama and Bush were related at somewhere down the line there.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that mean that Obama might have ties to Illuminati too?
Yeah, he has some blood from those bloodlines that I exposed in my book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Yeah, he does, and the Bushes do too. They have, I show genealogy charts. That's one of the things I was pleased with, was that this was before other people did it. But other people since me have done the same thing and gotten more attention. But at the start of my book and at the end, there's a chart that shows how 25 American presidents are closely related. That chart was done up long before Obama became president. Yeah, my inside source will tell me, okay, the Illuminati's going to tell Obama such and such, and sure enough, the next day he'll be obeying orders and doing something just like he was told. So, I'll just say the bottom line: he's a puppet. He does what he's told.
Well, haven't all the presidents been a puppet for a long time now?
Well, they're supposed to follow orders, but they don't always. John F. Kennedy didn't. He was a youngster that had a lot of life and personality, and he thought he was president, so he went ahead and tried to be president, which they didn't like. And, Royce, I went to Daley Plaza in Dallas, and then they had this monument to Kennedy just about a block away. Now, you're familiar with the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial and the Lincoln Memorial. I mean, these are impressive things, right? So I was thinking, John F. Kennedy, he's a president everybody loved. You know what they gave him? It's a dirty concrete wall. I mean, you could find that in any ghetto. That's what they gave him as a monument. Dirty concrete wall. Man, they're right in our face about how little respect they have for him because he challenged them and thought for himself. So,
well, yeah. It goes to show that in today's world, you can think for yourself, but if you do it publicly, you have to be ready for the consequences.
Yeah, for sure.
Myself, I prefer stuff for the consequences because I just can't handle not thinking for myself.
Yeah, I agree. And Onassis, who was one of the Illuminati kingpins, there were several Illuminati kingpins that gave the order, but he was like the main one. And so it's like almost a Wild West cowboy show where the bad guy, you shoot the guy and then you steal his wife, So he ran off with Kennedy's wife. It's like a bad movie. Let's see. Where would you like to go with our discussion?
Okay. Well,
I'm just talking.
One of the things that we was going to talk about, I wanted to cover that part you did real quick because I knew you didn't get a chance to finish about the before the show started earlier about the downsizing. But I'd read a little bit of your book, at least as much of it as time would allow, and I know that you cover actually each family separately and quite much in depth, in other words. So why don't you, I guess, start off by telling everybody as much as you can anyway about how you come about getting these inside sources that enabled you to write this book that you wrote.
Okay, well, I had been doing, like I said, thousands of hours of research into in fact, this whole thing about the world system, I started writing, exposing it in 1990, but I actually felt a calling to expose the world system back in 1978, and I actually started doing it clear back then. Back in the 70s, we had the Carter administration, and I was fortunate that some of my relatives were onto what's now called the Awake movement or the Truth movement. They would be now labeled that way. The farmers during the Carter administration were just being put out of business, and my grandparents, who were farmers in eastern Kansas, they became local leaders of the ag movement. In fact, my grandmother, who was just an old lady, was interviewed on television as a spokesperson for the ag movement. But the ag movement was trying to figure out, why do other people tell us what we're going to get paid for our crops? I mean, we produce this stuff, but we don't have any control over what is paid to us for it. And who's manipulating all of this, and who's controlling it? So they researched it, and they discovered, the Council of Foreign Relations and groups like this. So, they had a local ag movement office there in Council Grove, Kansas. That's that's the area that they lived in. If you went into that ag movement office, believe me, they were going to talk your head off about these Illuminati organizations like the Council of Foreign Relations and the control they had. So I was helped understand things, the banksters and so forth, by some of my awake relatives. And so clear back in the 70s, I was already on the track of all of this nefarious stuff. But it took a while before I was talked out of doing what I felt called to do in the 70s. It wasn't until 1990 that I got back doing the calling that I felt called to do, because people had talked me out of doing it. But when I got more maturity, I went back and started doing it. And I did all of this research, and then a friend of mine, who was very personable, the type of person that could talk to anybody right off the bat.
Right.
He was walking, and there was a group of women that were talking, and he overheard the word Illuminati. So he turned around and he said, hey, if you're interested in the Illuminati, you got to meet my friend. He knows all about it. He's done all this research and written all this stuff. And so he was the catalyst for them to meet me. They wanted to meet me because they were, like I say, they were trying to escape the Illuminati, and they were under the Illuminati's trauma-based mind control. They didn't fully understand what they had been involved with because their minds had been fractured. They were programmed multiple personalities. And so it was helpful for them to meet me. It was helpful for me to meet them. And now I could get more of an inside view. And two things that they pointed me in the right direction on was the bloodlines, the importance of the bloodlines, because you're basically born into the Illuminati. And the other one is the Illuminati's total mind control. It's this trauma-based total mind control that's like 1 million times more powerful than people think when they think of mind control. So then the next few years, my understanding of these topics greatly increased. I started writing an article, one article per month. Like this month, I would pick this bloodline. The next month, I'd pick another bloodline. As you notice, there's about 15 chapters in my Bloodlines of the Illuminati book. And each one of those chapters represented a month of research to write. So it was actually a series of articles, and then when I finished, people were saying, well, Fritz, you ought to combine this all into a book. That's how it ended up into a book. Originally a series of articles, which makes it difficult for some people to read the book because it's disjointed. It wasn't written from cover to cover. So, as you're reading through, you're really actually reading a series of articles instead of a seamless book. But for those people who already know something about this subject, I mean, I've gotten people who have gotten a hold of the Bloodlines book that said, wow, this is fantastic. I read it cover to cover. So it depends on where you're coming from,
right,
as to your response to the information.
Okay, so most of the information you got in that book actually came from inside sources, and people that had maybe at one time been in the Illuminati, or maybe some that were on the inside that were still sharing information.
Well, no, I wouldn't say most of it. What they were able to do was just point me in the right direction. Most of the research I went ahead and did on my own. In fact, I prefer it that way.
So most of this information is public record.
For instance, the Bundy family. These ladies told me that the Bundy family was one of the top 13 families. So then, knowing that, I then researched the Bundy family, which is pretty easy to do, because the Order of Skull and Bones had several prominent Bundys, and then you had your I'm spacing out this first name, but the Bundy that killed so many of the women.
Oh, yeah, Ted Bundy, wasn't it?
Ted Bundy. And then when you go in and look at Ted, if you're a researcher like I, and you start really looking really closely at things like this, you find out that he was a programmed multiple personality, which meant that, if the Illuminati had placed him under this mind control, he may well have been a member of the Illuminati. And then you look a little bit closer and you see that he was put in charge in Washington of an organization that was monitoring women being abused. So it's like they put the fox guarding the chicken coop. You kind of see a lot of that, but he was adopted too, which is something that's a very typical, is they move these children around. So the information is there. If if you're a researcher like me, I just get information from wherever I can, and you start scratching below the surface, and it's surprising what you can find. There's actually a lot of information out there if you just start digging. But see, most people aren't going to because they're so busy with their video games or their jobs or whatever's happening in their life. Or cheering their favorite football team on or their favorite basketball team. They're so filled with all these distractions, they don't have time for the type of research I do, nor did they have the experience. I've been researching and studying history since about the time I could read. That's just been my personality. And my father and mother, who were both brilliant, they catered to my intellectual curiosity. And so they never reined that in. So my intellectual curiosity has just continued to grow over the years. And if you look in my wallet, you see I have a library card to the Library of Congress.
Right. So you do a lot of your research down there at the library, in other words.
Wherever I can get information, the amount of sources, and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, so people know who I am. So, like this one woman who was going to be sacrificed, and she escaped from an Illuminati coven that was going to sacrifice her. She came to my house and told me her story because she knew who I was. Or there was a guy whose father had always hated all religion. And then as a very old man, he joined the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then when this man got my book, The Watchtower and the Masons, where I showed the connection between the Watchtower Society and Freemasonry, he drove all the way up from California to thank me and tell me that my book had finally made sense of his life, that he hadn't been able to figure out his father until he read my book. Well, I've had a lot of people do similar things. My books has been the missing key, and I wrote 7 books on the Illuminati. So for this person will be this book, for that person it might be a different one, but it'll put the missing pieces in place for them to finally understand their life, and they will travel halfway across the country to come to my doorstep just to thank me and tell me their own personal stories. So when you get this kind of dynamic, it's just like the information just keeps flowing. I don't even have to do anything. The information's being bombarded with information from lots of sources. Of course, that means you have to do a filtering. You have to, do a vetting process as to how reliable this information is. But that's just part of gathering intelligence.
Well, if you're looking stuff up on the internet, you can find plenty of information on anything there. But just like what you're talking about, it doesn't matter where it comes from. Even the internet, it has to be vetted.
Right. And while we're on the subject of the internet, I know it's common for people to think that the internet has all answers to everything. But in terms of research, I would say that of all the information that's out there for people to gather, like when I'm researching, I'd say the internet has maybe 5% of what's there. Court records. I've gone to court records. I've looked at corporate. They put out annual reports. I've gotten paperwork from specific places. I have interviewed I don't know how many hundreds of of people that were insiders. Police had talked with me, ones that aren't corrupt. Seems like most of the police are part of the system. And I don't say that frivolously, because when I was arrested back in the 90s for something that was bogus, the police were all mocking me. The county sheriffs, they were all mocking me, and they were mocking that I believed in the Constitution, ridiculing the Constitution. And there was one cop there, a deputy, who was listening to the other cops, and he was just totally embarrassed the way they were acting towards me. And then when it got time to take me to my cell, he volunteered to take me to my cell, and he apologized for the way that they were acting. But it was just like, I was really shocked that these people who are supposed to be defending the law actually have total disrespect for the Constitution and the law. In fact, one of them, one of these cops went so far as to not, and this was another incident, but he said, "I am the law." The arrogance of these people. I am the law. Okay.
At least so he thought in his mind anyway. But yeah, you get a lot of people out there with that kind of attitude, and actually it's not just cops. A lot of parents have that attitude. Sometimes teachers do too. Just some people are arrogant people. Now, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, go.
Okay.
Get right in there.
I was just going to say, getting back to the book issue, I was not aware that you had 7 other books. I think it was you just said. Can you tell us a little something about your other books?
Sure. And when I say 7, actually, the number is actually a little bit larger than that. But that 7 is a nice number.
Okay.
Well, I did a who, what, where, when, how. The what they're doing is the Be Wise as Serpents book, and that's an 800-page book.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it's not in polished form because Christian Patriot Association, I gave them my disc and my backup disc, and they lost them. So my wife at the time told me if I didn't quit working on the book, I was going to be divorced. So I just scratched together some paperwork. It wasn't the final version, and just put it out in a rough draft form because it was important to get the information out. That came out in 91, Be Wise as Serpents. But it's still, people have said it's my best book. It's still, even though it's in rough draft form, it's still perhaps my best book. And it goes into how they created all these Christian denominations, how they control them from behind the scenes. It shows the control, their system of systems and how they control it. It's the what, and it's pretty massive. And then I came out with the Bloodlines book, which is the who. So we've got the what and the who. And then I came out with 3 books on the Illuminati's trauma-based mind control, but only 2 of those are in print. The first one I call for short the formula book. It's a longer title, and I did one of these old-fashioned things of having a long title, the way they used to do in olden times, and it doesn't have a subtitle. But if I was to do it over again, which sometime I need to do, it is just the book should be called the Formula Book, and then the subtitle should be what I have as the title. The title is Illuminati Formula Used to Create an Undetectable Total Mind-Controlled Slave, which is a long title. But every one of those words were important, and I just didn't want to remove any of them because I wanted people to understand it's totally undetectable. It totally controls you, it's very powerful. So
kind of like we're all slaves right now and we don't know it.
Well, this is even worse than just your garden variety mind control that they do over the media. And then following that, those two books, I came out with The Where and The When in a book entitled Ezekiel 6:3, which was on spiritual warfare, and it gives hundreds of ritual sites around the United States. It gives all the standard and non-standard rituals. In terms of the occult world, every day of the year almost has some kind of a ritual you can do on that day. But then there's there's standard rituals that are important for the Illuminati. So that was the where and the when, and then there's a few other books. There was this one's out of print. It was called the accompanying book. It went with my prophecy club talk that I gave in 14 cities. 12 of those cities for Prophecy Club, and then 2 other cities where I set up the speaking engagement myself.
In fact, I found one of your Prophecy Club videos over at YouTube. I think it was like a 2-hour-long video.
Mm-hmm.
Very in-depth with what you're talking about now, about how they do the mind control. And I think I remember you even had a big old picture of a pyramid showing how it all starts with a few at the top and then umbrellas out down toward the bottom to us, and we're, of course, at the base.
Yes, that pyramid picture that you're referring to has been borrowed by people and is in thousands of places on the internet. The only thing different about it is they've cut out the little thing at the bottom that says copyright Fritz Springmeier, so people don't know where it came from. But it's been very popular for people to use, and definitely, if people want a good overview, a distillation of my information, watching that Prophecy Club YouTube video is an excellent place to start. It seems like a lot of people would, prefer to listen to something on YouTube than to read. Reading's kind of becoming old-fashioned, I guess.
Yeah, my son Josh tells me that unless it's got action in it of some kind, he can't sit down and pay attention to it. If it's just something that's enlightening, he gets bored and puts it down.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Which I'm laughing about it, but it's really very sad.
Yeah, it is. It is sad. That's one of the blessings about prison is when people go there, they're bored and they're forced for the first time in their life to actually read a book.
Or go crazy. Go stir crazy. Cabin fever. But, one of the things that I remembered in that video also that you mentioned was that the Illuminati operates off of a certain Gnostic belief. I'm trying to remember what it was, but I think it dealt with doing charity, didn't it?
Very good, yes. There are people out there, and you look up in their biographies, like who's who in America or whatnot, and you look up in there, and where it lists occupation, it will say philanthropist. Now, what's a philanthropist? A philanthropist is someone who gives away money. Now, that's a strange occupation, isn't it? I mean, if you and
I'd like to
had
know
that as
one.
an occupation, we would definitely be worse off than we are right now. And I tell you what, I'm just on God's manna program. I live from day to day, so I can't see myself being a very proficient philanthropist. But it goes back to the Illuminati's Gnostic belief system that your good deeds need to balance your bad deeds.
That's what it was. Thank you.
Yes. And so during the day, these people are leading citizens, and they're out there giving millions of dollars to, look at Bill Gates and George Soros and some of these others. They actually contribute far more than the rest of us. I mean, they've got, there's foundations, and they give this and they give that, and then at night they switch to their other personalities, and then they're the dark side. So they're dark.
It's okay to go out and kill everybody as long as you're giving the people you let live a little money for the pockets.
So they're into this balance. They
okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you on that one, Fritz, but I just heard the break time music, so why don't we go to a break for right now, and try to remember your place in case I forget, and we'll come back to it after the break. God, I gotta love that break music from Revolution Radio. We're back now, everybody. And Fritz, did you happen to mark the place like I asked you to?
Well, I was just talking about balance and how that's part of their Gnostic belief system. Understanding their belief system will help people understand some side issues. One is, if we look at some of the ancient Gnostic material, we discovered that it refers to Mary Magdalene being the wife of Yeshua, Jesus Christ. And indeed, they believe that their top bloodlines are descended from both Christ and Lucifer. And, of course, their genealogies are very important to them. And these modern Illuminati bloodlines go way back to the powerful bloodlines of Babylon, Egypt, these bloodlines that way back then thought that they were gods. They continue to think that they are have been illuminated to divinity, and you can imagine if you believe that you are the descendants of Christ Himself, that you have a special mandate to rule, but their Christian beliefs would be more like the Cathars or the Albigensians. And so it would be more of a Gnostic Christian type of belief than the variety that the Protestants or Catholics have.
So the Christianity of the Protestants and the Catholics, is that in any way affiliated with the Illuminati, or are they totally different, or just different branches of the same tree?
Well, they don't care what us common people believe as long as they control us. So that's the thing with my Be Wise the Serpent's book and other materials that I put out. I've gone in and showed how they have controlled these religious denominations. They actually use the United Grand Lodge, which is in London. to disseminate orders to their religious leaders around the world. So like the Illuminati will tell their people in the United Grand Lodge, okay, this is the order that we want you to send the Grand Rabbi in Jerusalem, the Grand Mufti in Cairo, the Protestant leaders, and the Catholic black and white Pope. So the orders for their people that are controlling these religions are disseminated through the United Grand Lodge, but the political orders are routed through MI6. So where the Grand Rabbi is getting his orders through Freemasonry, the politicians are getting their orders coming through MI6 on a daily basis. Let's see what else to say. So there's some Christian denominations that reflect the beliefs of the Illuminati closer than others. For instance, Mormonism. The Mormon leaders are all their prophet presidents of the LDS Mormon Church have all been from one bloodline, and it's this Merovingian holy bloodline that they believe is the blood of Jesus Christ.
Is that why Joseph Smith and his church was so interested in tracing bloodlines and genealogies? Is because they believe there's an attachment to Christ?
Well, that's part of it, yeah. They're certainly getting the Mormon, the lay Mormons to do a lot of work for the Illuminati. The primary religious duty of a Mormon is to do his genealogy research, and then they go and they baptize the dead. Like, you find out all these people in your genealogy, and then you baptize them. But what it's doing for the Illuminati is it's compiling and getting a total record of everything that's happened in the past, which is great. If you're going to control the world, it's important to know all of these genealogies and the DNA, how the DNA has come down and everything. So, yeah, and then they have the Protestants helping them out, too. Back in, 1993, they came out with this Evangelism 2000 project through Billy Graham and some of the others, where all of these churches that supported the Billy Graham Crusades, they sent their members out door to door, and they wrote down the religious affiliation of everybody, every house. So, talk about doing Big Brother's footwork. All those records of all of these neighborhoods and who believes what and where they live, which is great for a police state, was all that work was done by the Christians, not being aware of Big Brother or who they were really helping.
Now, that's something else I was going to ask you about, but before I do, I wanted to ask you about if religion's main purpose was to brainwash the masses, but I'm getting it out now before I forget in a minute, and I try to remember it. Before we come to that, I wanted to also remind everybody that you can learn more about Fritz and keep up with his most recent material by going to facebook.com/Fritz.Springmeier.9. Or, to get to Facebook, you can just use their search engine and type in Fritz Springmeier, and it'll autofill the rest of it once you get FR out. And make it easy for you to find. You can even see his picture, help you know you got the right one, in other words. I don't think there's more than one on Facebook that I can think of off the top of my head. But back to what I was just asking about the purpose of religion. Do you know if that's if its main goal was to make it easy for people to brainwash them into, going along with the program without knowing they're going along with it?
The Illuminati set up a system of systems, and two major important systems for controlling people. One is your finances, and the other is your religion. And if you can control those two aspects of a person's life, you pretty well got them on the leash. So religion has been used to control people, but it's like so many things in life. There's a positive and a negative. Christ came to set the captives free. Christ came, and if you listen to his words and what he said, told people, he was trying to get people to elevate themselves spiritually. He was trying to get them to, clean up their own lives. He was challenging the system. He wasn't supporting the system. He was challenging the world system. So, I'm a follower of Christ. I believe in Christ. I just have a hard time with these religious denominations that I know have been set up by the world, and they basically hijacked the teachings of Christ. Most of these churches don't even preach from the words of Christ. They preach from other things. They will give positive messages, but they're not going to give you the hard teachings of Christ. Surprising to me how, talking to some of these people that go to church, how little they know. The teachings of Christ, good. The Christendom, which is a way of controlling people, not so good. But Christendom's just one of the religions. You've got Islam, you've got sects of Judaism, you've got all of these Hindu gurus going around. They're really bad. A lot of these Hindu gurus are just totally in it for their own selfish interests, and people think that they're going to get this Far Eastern enlightenment, so they enroll in their ashrams and become slaves.
Wow.
For the gurus just turn them into slaves. Religion is used definitely to control. And the Babylonian system was where you married political and religious power. So, the French kings, like Louis XIV, the church would come along and say, this is God's king for us, and then the king supports the priest, the Catholic priest. So both systems of power support each other and lock the people into the control. But that's just not a thing of Christendom, but the ancient Babylonian pagan religions did the same thing, The priests of the pharaohs would tell people that, the gods, Pharaoh was one of the gods reincarnated, and that the gods supported the arrangement that they had. And then, of course, the political power of the pharaoh would support the priest. So you lock the people in.
You said something very interesting I couldn't help but pick up on about reincarnation, because most people who, believe in the teachings of Christ don't believe in reincarnation, so you're kind of unique.
Oh, I didn't say I believe in reincarnation. But I know that a lot of people do. I don't know what I said in reference to that. Can you go back and...
You just said that the Pharaoh was supposed to be the reincarnation of the god.
Oh yeah, that was way back in ancient times.
So you were saying that in the context of that was a belief back then, not in you believed that, in other words.
Yeah, I'm not into Egyptian, the Egyptian belief system. If you read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it's quite a mishmash of just spells and incantations that are just, it doesn't even compare with the beauty of the Word of God. One of the things that I feel is my job is to call people back to the ancient wisdom that's found in what we call the Bible, the Word of God. There's a lot of wisdom there, and the thing is people, from my vantage point, are arrogant in that in their short lifetime, and we don't, how wise do we really get in our short lifetime? People are so quick just because it's politically incorrect to read the Bible, they just toss it aside and say, oh, it's just a piece of junk, there's nothing in there for me. Well, no, the wisdom that's there in the Holy Scriptures was accumulated over thousands of years. It's a distillation of wisdom for many years, and so there's a lot of good to be gotten there, and a lot of profound things, truth that, thou shalt not steal, or do unto others as you want done unto you, these truths are so obvious in a sense that you'll even find them in other places besides the Holy Scriptures. So one of the things that you'll notice when you start reading my material, and people will notice that we're in a war. We're in a war between the dark side and the good side, or the kingdom of life versus the kingdom of death. And in our culture, we have so much that's related to death. You see a lot of people with spider webs and skulls tattooed onto themselves. It's a reflection of how the kingdom of death is running a lot of things in our culture anymore.
Right. Now, also, folks, y'all listening in here, the call-in number is 347-688-2902. We'd love to have you call in and ask him some questions in the last 50 minutes or 40 minutes, of the show. And if you aren't by phone right handy or don't like to call in, you can always put questions in the chat room. I am, reading it as we go. I'll be more than happy to ask your questions there. And, these guests, they usually love to get feedback, and they like to know you're not in the chat room sleeping. Which if they are, they're typing in their sleep. But, a lot of talk usually happens in these chat rooms, but it's not exactly always about what the show's about. Getting back to where we were at, though, one of the things I meant to ask you about this here is, can you kind of give everybody a rundown on who all these here families are, and maybe, if you can, a little part of what their function is in the organization?
Sure. I think most everybody has recognized that the Rockefellers are a very powerful family, and they're involved in petroleum, they're involved in banking, in politics. Also, the Rockefellers give a lot of money to churches, and there's who knows how many foundations that the Rockefellers have set up. I don't think they even know. There's hundreds of. I think at one time, and I don't want to be quoted on this, but there was something like 600 or 700 Rockefeller foundations, and some of these foundations have a lot of money. Of course, these are not taxed by the government, and they are supposedly non-profit, but they profit the Rockefeller family because they're self-serving. I mean, they pretend to be philanthropists, but a lot of their philanthropy is self-serving. So, the Rockefellers are one of the families. The Rothschilds have been called the rulers of Europe for many years, and their power is enormous. And when you look at a family like the Rothschilds, and you will notice that they have controlled the Bank of England and the currency of the British Empire. Before the American dollar became the world's reserve currency, the British pound sterling was the world's reserve currency, and it was controlled by the Rothschilds. And also the Rothschilds on a daily basis, one of them, who's a banker, determines the price of gold. So Rothschilds are another very powerful family. Now, in terms of the Rothschild family, the leaders of the bloodline are in Europe, but it doesn't mean that the Rothschilds aren't scattered around the world. If you go to Napa Valley, California, for instance, you'll see that the Rothschilds have a vineyard there, and other Illuminati neighbors. So they're scattered throughout the United States too. We have Rothschilds here in Oregon where I live. So one of the things I did was to expose some of them. And then a family that's kept themselves extremely low-key, and I had the privilege to be the first person to expose them because they've been so low-key that they flew underneath the radar, was the Van Dyne family. And they actually now I have the genealogy that traces them back to the Merovingians. There's been a number of prominent families that are descendant from the Merovingians. And, for people that know history, the Habsburgs and the Stuarts, and so when you look at these families, you see that they're the ones that became the original stockholders of the Federal Reserve. So you see like Morgan, Bill Rockefeller, Pine, J.D. Rockefeller. These people became the stockholders of the Federal Reserve. So what we're saying is these people aren't rich. These people control the means by where money is created. Of course, as you know, Royce, the way the Illuminati set things up is money is just created out of thin air. It's a great magic trick.
Well, yeah, but that is basically what they have been doing, and I mean, it's not just you saying this. It's all over YouTube. I mean, everybody and his brother has a video out on it, and especially since the Zinc Gas movement put out their video, it's been very popular.
Yeah. And so, let's see, going back to discussing some of these bloodlines, DuPonts, the DuPonts have been involved in the military-industrial complex. From the very start of things, they were producing gunpowder. So every time the United States gets into a war, which happens every few years, they make billions of dollars off of munitions. And in fact, a normal American cannot go through a single day without using some DuPont product. You know, nylons or paint or on and on. And then recently we had a DuPont who buggered his son, molested his son, was arrested, and the judge let him off. And that's so typical. These people get away with murder. They're not held accountable for their crimes. And but there's quite a few DuPont estates located around places like Pennsylvania and Delaware. New Jersey and Delaware have been run by the DuPonts. Those states are like their little fiefdoms. Pardon me?
You said they own everything there, almost all the businesses, in other words.
Yeah, they control everything in those little states. And another Illuminati bloodline that was just trimmed out, but they were very prominent, was the Astor family. And their rise to become powerful and wealthy is just incredible. I mean, if somebody reads my Bloodlines of the Illuminati book, you will see how when the hierarchy of the Illuminati give a green light, they can take a bloodline that doesn't have anything, and they can elevate them in a few years to be the richest. And that's what happened to John Jacob Astor the First. He comes over here. The guy does not have a winning personality at all.
I read this in your book.
Yeah. I mean, the type of person he was is if he's at a nice meal where everybody's sitting around, in fancy clothes, eating at an expensive meal, he would have the audacity to grab the shirt of the guy next door to him and use it to wipe his mouth. He was, and when he spoke, he had a German accent that sounded like someone with marbles in their mouth. You could barely understand his English. And yet, within a few years, he becomes the head of Freemasonry. The fur trade has been going on in North America for almost 200 years before he comes along, and then in a few years, he totally controls it with a monopoly. I mean, and then you see him end up the landlord of a large percentage of New York City. These things don't just happen. They're because the world system controlled by the Illuminati has said, okay, this is a bloodline that we're going to allow to rise to the top. And once they get the green light, then everything works their way. For instance, when the United States got in war with England, some people called it the Second War of Independence. It's also called the War of 1812. Why American shipping shut down. So the New England shipping industry was just totally devastated. And not Astor. He got special permission from the president to trade. So he got wealthy while everybody else was being broke by the war. The same way with the DuPonts. They made out scandalously in all of these wars too. Continue to make large amounts of money every time we get into a war. So that gives a little bit of a picture of some of these bloodlines,
especially some of the more prominent ones, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Now, especially, it seemed to me like the Rothschild would probably be, importance-wise, major league player right up at the very top of the ladder. Am I far off on that one?
Oh, yeah. There's an inner circle right now of 3 families. The Rockefeller, Rothschild, and Van Dyne are the three inner families. And, you just can't underestimate how powerful the Rothschilds are. The Rothschilds continue to control the British currency. The Van Dynes are in control of the euro.
And which one's in control of the Vatican's money?
Well, the Rothschilds are the Vatican bankers. They became their bankers early in the 1800s. And, of course, anybody who controls the bank, somebody's money, whether they can make loans or not, has got the upper hand. The Pope is not powerful like some of these conspiracy theorists think. They think they see a Jesuit under every rock and that everything's done by the Jesuits. It's a false dialectic. It's not a battle against the Seventh-day Adventist and the Catholic Church. That's a false dialectic. There's a lot of sin to go around that can be apportioned to all of us. There isn't. You can't say that the Protestants are the good guys and the Catholics are the bad guys. That's just a false dialectic there. Let's see. Oh, and clear back in 1992, I was giving lists of many of the Vatican officials who are Freemasons and their secret initiation days, their secret Masonic membership numbers and Masonic names and on and on. And so, the Vatican is run by a bunch of Freemasons.
Well, I was given to understand that it was run by a bunch of crypto Jews, but then again, that's without vetting some of the articles I've read on the internet. But these Freemasons could also be crypto Jews as far as that goes too, couldn't they?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of overlap. And in fact, you brought up something very important that I want to stress, and that is the idea of putting labels to the world system and the power structure. It defies labels. People say, "Oh, it's a Jewish conspiracy." No. It goes beyond that. Oh, it's a Catholic conspiracy. No. It goes beyond that. Labels are hard to put on it, and I'm saying that at the top of the pyramid, as far as humans, I believe that there's non-human entities above them, but as far as humans are concerned, the Illuminati's the top of the pyramid, the all-seeing eye. But even there, it's difficult to put a label on them because due to the fact that they're programmed multiple personalities, they are the leaders of society. They're the pillars of our communities. These people during the daytime are the people that everybody looks up to. They're the Billy Grahams. And it's just that they have an evil side to them.
And kind of a Jekyll Hyde thing going on?
Oh, exactly. And one of the things that Hitler covered up when he did the Anschluss with Austria was the fact that his grandmother, who had worked for the Rothschilds in Vienna, his grandmother had been impregnated by a Rothschild. Hitler was a Rothschild. He destroyed those records as soon as the Anschluss happened, although, something like that's impossible to totally cover up. But you look at the good that Hitler did for Germany, from a German perspective, they had been humiliated. They were starving in the streets. They had hyperinflation, on and on. And Hitler gave them, he revived the economy. He gave them pride. All these good things he did. So
yes, this is true.
If you're just looking at the balance sheet and say, okay, well, well, who did the most good for Germany during the 1930s? Of course, his name would come to the top, but then there's the other side of the balance sheet there, all the negative that he brought too.
Well, I was about to say, if what you're saying is correct, that makes him a good example of Jekyll and Hyde, because on one hand, he would have been a German Jew if he had Rothschild blood in him. Plus, he would have been persecuting Jews, including German Jews, one hand on their side, on the other hand against them. So that's kind of Jekyll and Hyde in itself, isn't it?
Exactly, and that's why I say trying to put labels on this thing is pretty well defies. These people are masters of deceit. They have been developing techniques to be undercover and deceive and so forth for thousands of years. They've got this down to a science and on how to deceive us. And so what you see is not what you get.
Do any of these bloodlines go back to the Herodians? Do you know?
Well, I think that the Herodian, I've seen some genealogies that suggest to me that their blood has carried into this whole thing. There's quite a genetic pool here of several streams coming together. And one of the things that the Rothschilds have tried to do is they've tried to take the most powerful blood from different streams of DNA and pull them together. Sort of like, how you make a rope by taking different strands, and the more powerful strands you have, the more powerful rope you'll get. So they've been combining stuff. And in fact, the Rothschilds have intermarried some of these bloodlines that believe that they go back to Christ. The Sassoons, is an example. Foxes, Sassoons, both of those trace their lineage back to the house of David. So, the secret genealogies of the Rothschilds also trace back to Nimrod, who was a very powerful God.
That's what I would like to do one of these days, is to trace the house of David back to Nimrod, because the common belief right now is that Nimrod was of the line of Cain and David was of the line of Seth. But I got a hunch there was a lie somewhere in history, and that the David line and the Nimrod line may be joined together at some point.
Well, they definitely are joined together within the Rothschilds. But the joining was later. I mean, I'm not saying the house of David came from Nimrod, but definitely later on, both branches, streams are joined together. It's just part of their elite project to get the most powerful blood that they can.
So they didn't really care if it came from the line of Seth or the line of Cain, as long as it was all one in the end.
Yeah, as long as if there's power there, they want to hijack and control it. Which, if you create a good, powerful organization, they're going to try to infiltrate it and turn it towards their goals and control it. So, another way that I describe it is anything clean out there, they want to dirty.
Which this is actually, I believe, a biblical teaching. I think it talks about it a lot in Revelation, about like the dragon swallowing up the woman and her offspring at some point. Is an allusion to trying to muddy the water so there can't be a promised seed, in other words.
Yeah. Well, and then they see themselves as the promised seed.
Well, I'm sure they think if they pollute that seed, they'll become the promised seed.
Yeah. So what Christ was teaching us was that It doesn't. And he confronted the Pharisees. He's like, "Oh, you think you're the ancestors of? You're the descendants. Excuse me. You're the descendants of Abraham. But he was your ancestor." He goes, "No, your father is Satan." See, it's a spiritual thing. I mean, for people that go in and say, "Well, okay, here's my genealogy, blah blah," Christ was saying, "No, it's a spiritual thing. You need to worship God in truth and spirit because that's who He is. So you just can't go and say, okay, I got this genealogy. That doesn't mean anything. Where's your heart? What kind of a person are you?" That's what.
There's good reason for that too, if you ask me. I mean, right now there's a book out by Tex Mars, and I'm sure you know him. In fact, you and me have mentioned him before, about the crypto Jews in Jerusalem now, saying the land is theirs. They have every right to kick the Palestinians out because they're the seed of Abraham. If God had permitted for a physical seed, then yes, people legally could come in and say something like that. However, if it was a spiritual seed, then you can say it all you want to. If the promise was never made to a physical seed, it could never apply to you no matter what you claim or no matter what you believe.
And then a lot of these people are not related to the Israelites anyway. So but the analogy would be if I went to somebody's property and said, 2,000 years ago, my ancestor owned this property. Get out of your house. It's now mine.
Like they're doing right now.
Exactly. There is no moral right to do this. And the whole dynamic behind all of this was set in motion intentionally by the Rothschilds because the Illuminati plans were to create trouble in the Middle East, and they definitely have done that.
They're trying to turn the rest of the world against the Middle East?
Well, they love chaos and conflict. They do controlled conflict, and it's called Hegelian dialectics. You create a problem, and then you create two sides, and then out of the problem reaction, you get a solution, and so it's a way of moving the world in the direction that they want to go.
And of course, the solution will always have your agenda embedded in it.
Mm-hmm.
Or should I say their agenda, in other words?
Exactly. So World War I was a controlled conflict they created, and out of that you get the League of Nations. World War II was a controlled conflict that they created. Out of that you get the United Nations. And then the Third World War will have an even more powerful world government come out of it. So this is the way things are set up, the pattern. But they, with
well, I think these people have a sense of irony, if you ask me, Fritz. I mean, it seems like what they're really doing is they're setting up these situations just to make everybody cry out and beg for the trouble that they're going to bring them in the end, and they think it's some kind of irony in watching people beg for what they're going to give them that they're not going to like, in other words.
You're 100% correct. They want us to ask them to do what they want to do, and people go right along with it. Oh, please, please, do this.
Oh, did I stick a knife in your back? Didn't you ask me to do that last week? I think they get some kind of a sense of thrill out of it, in other words. Look at them dummies. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. It's like, I'm just trying to get people to think this through. If you were trying to design something to make it easy to catch young blacks, okay, well, let's create a fashion where you wear your pants down by your knees, and then you can't run very fast. So I was watching this guy cross the crosswalk the other day as I came up to the intersection, and it looked at first like he had shackles, hobbles on. He was just like taking steps like an inmate with shackles on. And then I realized it's because his pants are almost down to his knees, and he could barely walk, you know. And I'm sure that whoever created that fashion is just, getting a lot of good laughs at how these people have set themselves up to be easy to catch by the police.
And then they, like 911, they wanted to get more security in airports and courtrooms and other places like that. So what they do, they created a need to have the security so people would give away their rights and let them put up the machines that do the x-rays and that, in other words.
Oh, yeah.
And then the next thing they're going to do is they're going to create a situation by which the chip's going to be needed that they're going to implant inside everybody.
Yeah, exactly. I was traveling. It was like circa 1995, 96. Sometime in there, I was going by air. And I was sitting there waiting for my plane, and there was another lady, totally unrelated to me, but she was talking. There were two ladies talking, and the one lady that was talking was one of these. She talked and looked like one of these Illuminati types, with just her arrogant attitude and everything. And she was boasting how there was going to be an incident created where they would take our they would create this incident so that we would want security and we would have all this airport security. She was describing 9/11, and she was tickled pink that something like this was going to happen. And this was years before it happened. So, she was just one way that I had gotten a heads up that something like this was going to happen, just like what you were saying. And so we gave our freedom away to supposedly have security.
And people are still doing it today, and they don't know they're doing it. But we're running out of time, and I wanted to have a chance for you to be able to make some suggestions about things people can do to maintain the freedom they have still got, and maybe even try to get back some of the freedoms they used to have.
A good question or topic. The thing is they have tried to make us dependent. So anything that gives you back your independence and self-sufficiency is powerful. Learn how to take care of your health. Learn how to cook. Learn how to garden. Don't depend on their processed food. Their processed food is designed to make us weak. Learn what kind of things that you can do, and there's many powerful things that people can do that will make them healthy and make them a lot less vulnerable to these diseases, these manufactured diseases that they send our way. Learn how to educate yourself. Learn how to be responsible for what you think. Don't just buy into anything that their so-called experts tell you. Don't sit there and like a little child sucking on the nipple, just suck up all the information that they give you on the television, the 6 o'clock news. It never ceases to amaze me that people will sit there and tell me they know that television news is propaganda, and then they'll turn around and watch it and buy it. And it's like, you just told me you realize that these people are feeding you a spin, and then you sit there and listen to it,
and then go spread it around the world like it was the gospel.
Yeah, so people need to take responsibility. Now that we got an internet, we can go out and we have an alternative news source where we can go around the controlled media, and we can actually learn things that they don't want us to know. So use that. So yeah, there's in general what it is take your life back and quit being dependent on the system. people that are just, some people go, oh, well, I'm going to get on welfare, and I'm going to help take the system down by getting you on the welfare. You're not taking the system down. You're just making yourself less independent and more dependent when you should be working towards the opposite goal. So set your life up so that, in your house you have medical supplies and some emergency food and a few items that, water is the most critical thing, because you can only live like 3 days without water. So people should get themselves these little filter straws and things like that so that they have a few simple things that will allow them to continue to have drinking water.
Or they can build themselves a well.
Yeah. There's so many things that we can do to make ourselves less dependent on.
You know what? I think there he is. I'm sorry, Larry. I think I almost lost you there for a second.
Oh, I'm still. Thanks, Royce.
Okay, but what I'm getting at is it would be kind of hard to backstore enough water to last for any kind of time span, especially if you got a family. Something like a well might be a little more realistic, or if you can somehow get situated close to a lake, you can always pan your water out and purify it on the stove.
Sure. Well, they have these water filters, too, that are like straws that aren't that expensive. Things like this, will go a long ways towards giving us a safety net.
Right.
So
if you can get moved into property that's close to a lake, that would be ideal because it was a perfect place to garden. Mm-hmm. Your water's right there. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is purify it, and you're less dependent on the government, and you're even set up in a place that you could probably get solar electricity if you wanted it.
Mm-hmm. So, before Obama's administration is over, we will see the crash of the U.S. dollar. We're already in the middle of it being dethroned as the world's reserve currency. And so the world as we know it's going to change. And we are already in really hard times. People are not realizing how desperate things are because they're doing a good job of covering it up by, 46 million Americans have, there's these food stamp cards, 46 million of them. If the government wasn't using these, we would see long soup lines like back in the 1930s, and people would realize how desperate it is. But that free ride is going to end here when the dollar crashes. So people need to learn ways of taking care of themselves.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. Now, real quick, we've only got 5 minutes remaining, and they're going to start the music for the next guest, maybe not even 5 minutes. Are there any last-minute thoughts you'd like to share with everybody real quick?
Yeah, a very important thought is the concept of hope. And this goes back to the Holy Scriptures. The Bible, the Word of God, says that hope is a virtue. We so oftentimes think of, well, he's a good man because he's honest, or he's a good man because he's hardworking and provides for his family, or she's a good person because she is so caring, And we often don't think, because I've never seen it preached, that having hope is a virtue. But the Scriptures say a person who has hope is a virtuous person. And so besides being honest, besides being hardworking, besides being caring, loving, you need to have hope. And that's very important. You need to be people of hope. When you lose hope, you're going to quit moving forward in a positive way. And a lot of this stuff that's coming at us, it's real easy to feel overwhelmed.